So, Ed, I got to thinking, my friend, and you know that's never a good thing. At one time, we dreamed of brighter days. You as the Jerry Bruckheimer of the streets, me as the Marv Albert of the streets. And the question tonight, Ed, is how the hell did we end up here? I have an answer, folks. Come step in the arena. On the other side of this intro, I'll tell you where it's at.
This guy has made it through rounds playing the style that he plays.
He named every one. It's like this guy named all 5 of my game-winning shots from 2008, 2009.
I played with two of the most exciting players ever to play the game, Allen Iverson and Vince Carter.
That's Edgar Burgos. I'm Bobby C. On the other side of the virtual world is our producer, Randy Cruz. Meantime, thank you for being on the other end of this audio podcast on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, and on the video side on YouTube and, of course, Twitter tonight for Step in the Arena on the Cruise Control Podcast Network in partnership with Hard to Guard Media. Now, Ed, I've been suffering from what they call tennis elbow. Our guest tonight is really big into tennis and basketball. So apparently it's tennis elbow or golfer's elbow, but I don't play either of those sports, Ed. I do, however, like to hurl myself off my motorcycle periodically. I did that for the second time back in October, and apparently that combined with all of this typing in this pandemic format that we have has caused this new painful thing I have going on. And, you know, most of the time LeBron James wears one of these things, the compression sleeves, Ed, you know, because it's
I know well
a trendy thing to wear in basketball. But I don't know, as a sports reporter, I would say it's not, not as good of a thing to have to wear here in the house. But, you know, it leads me to the intro question tonight, which, you know, why are we doing this? Why have we been doing this for so long? I would say my elbows can't take it anymore. Marv Albert is 79. Jerry is 77. And that means that we are very old ourselves, Ed, you know, and it dawned on me tonight when I slipped on this awesome White Man Can't Jump t-shirt and realized that my light here on the show is so bright that I'm looking like Casper for our podcast tonight. The movie came out in 1992, folks. Basically, I guess the silver lining, Ed, that I wanted to open with our intro tonight is that Marv is still calling games, Jerry is still producing shows, and they've got to retire soon, which means that you and I, it's about to be our time, my friend. Ebony and Ivory, Marv and Jerry, Jerry and Marv, Ed and Bobby, Bobby and Ed, and yes, with a splash of Randy. What a combination. What a combination. Ed, yeah. The triangle offense is dead, which is why we're bringing in a real pro tonight, a scribe of scribes, our guest, a real pro, Marc Berman of the New York Post.
Thanks, guys. Quite the intro.
What's up?
I loved it.
Thank you. That was my soliloquy tonight, Mark.
Excuse me?
That was my soliloquy tonight because I know Ed is going to break my chops. He got a light. Now I got a light, but I'm too bright. And again, he loves to call me last minute and say, "Hey, bam, we got a podcast tonight, whether you're prepared for it or not. Marc Berman's coming on. Turn that light on. Figure it out. We're ready to go."
All right. Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys.
I appreciate the time, Mark. I appreciate the time.
Yeah. 21st season for me here with the Knicks, and it's one of the best.
So I was going to say, being there for 21 years, how would you rate your experience?
Well, I mean, this season has been so different. I mean, I'm starting to travel now. I went to New Orleans and Dallas. I've gone to Washington, Philadelphia, but that's it. I've watched a lot of Knicks on the television covering games this season, and obviously we're not allowed in the locker room. So it's been a very different experience, but being at the Garden, I've been to the Garden almost every single game, and ever since the fans have been allowed in, it's been so much fun. I didn't think that 2,000 fans could make that much noise. Honestly, I was skeptical when they said they'd have 2,000 in the building. I was worried, like maybe it's going to be even more depressing. But it's been hardly that. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this season more than any season. I mean, less travel, I have more energy.
Yeah, I was gonna tell. Me and Bobby has actually talked about, like, for a guy like yourself who gets news in the locker room, do you miss that?
Yeah, well, the Zoom era is difficult from a journalistic standpoint. We request some players on Zoom and they don't give it to us. They give us who they want. The Knicks, for instance, if like earlier in the season, if say Frank Ntilikina didn't get in the game when it was still a novelty, we'd ask to talk to Frank, and we wouldn't get him. We would get a couple of guys who played a lot. So to limit controversy, the Knicks have done a great job in not allowing us to talk to certain players like Austin Rivers during his controversial times when he was out of the rotation before he got traded. But in the locker room, you just go up to anyone you want and talk to them, and that's what I miss. You don't have the freedom to really go around the locker room, and actually, when you get down to it, it's less distractions for the ball club. We're not in the locker room, and I think it's one of the reasons why the club talks about how close knit they are, and that's because there's not like 20 of us in the locker room before the game and after the game.
Bobby?
That's my cue, Ed, to jump in here with the questions. I was giving you some time to shine, because during the intro I stole all the thunder with the soliloquy, so I figured let you roll with the questions. Marc, obviously you mentioned how long you've been doing this. I've known you for a long time. You definitely are the Post's authority on the New York Knicks, and as I mentioned in the intro too, on tennis as well. But for me, I got to ask you, of course, about the Knicks, because I think it's bizarro world that the Yankees can't buy a hit. They can't seem to win a game, but all of a sudden you have the Knicks with this win streak right now. And I've never seen more of Anthony Donahue fist pumping after games than I have these days. So I guess the question for me is, how in the world are the Knicks winning these many games?
Yeah, it's stunning. Yankees can't win, and the Knicks are on an 8-game winning streak, longest since 2014. It shows that coaching is everything. I mean, we all remember Thibodeau on Van Gundy's staff. He was a sharp assistant, and Van Gundy, basically he was a Van Gundy clone. And the Knicks, since Van Gundy left the building in 2001, it's been really bad. And, the coaching, Don Chaney was okay, but, he was kind of past his prime when he became head coach of the Knicks. And it's just been one, besides Mike Woodson, really, they haven't had an elite coach. I thought D'Antoni did a pretty decent job, but, you really appreciate what great coaching is all about. And even today, just doing a story about the coach of the year candidacy with Thibodeau, being in line for possibly getting some votes. I think he should be number one, in my opinion. It's not an opinion shared nationally, but the biggest thing he does, he prepares them for every game like it's a playoff game. That Julius Randle is on record saying that. The attention to detail, these players have never had a coach who cared so much about every single game. There's no load management with the Knicks. R.J. Barrett has played every game. Julius Randle has played every game but one. Most of their key guys have played. No one rests. Every game is important. Will they burn out? There's a possibility in the playoffs that they're not going to be as fresh as maybe some other teams. But I think the fans really appreciate this season.
Yeah, Marc, season high, 6 games over 500. More importantly, they've taken control of the 4th seed in the East. I would say that's probably been the knock coming in on Thibs, is the fact that oftentimes he's really worn out teams that he's had some previous success with. But I think as a Knicks fan, you probably would sign up for that right now because you haven't seen it in so long. And you mentioned Randle, and I think he has to be the guy that you look at as the one that's been like the real revelation here. He's the real primary reason why they've had this much success. And if Thibs is going to be coach of the year, I think Randle probably should be considered for most improved, if not all NBA.
I mean, I think it's a guarantee that he's an all NBA right now. Third team. Listen, Jimmy Butler has missed so many games, and Miami, well behind the Knicks right now. Julius is a triple-double threat every night. And as much as fans loved Carmelo Anthony, I mean, the guy had one triple-double his entire career. He just was not a facilitator. He was a pure scorer. But Randle gets the whole team going, besides his great rebounding. I mean, the assist factor with Julius is just unbelievable. Doubling his total this year. He's over 6 assists a game, and he's getting hockey assists. He's moving the ball beautifully. If you remember last season, such a disappointment with how he over-dribbled, got in trouble, turned the ball over. Now he's just moving the ball, and that's credit to Thibodeau. He's got Randle playing the right way, and 5 triple doubles. He's playing like a lefty LeBron James right now. I mean, that's how LeBron plays. He's a point forward, Julius, right now, and he's taking the burden off the Knicks point guards. And the point guard situation is not their strong suit, but because of Julius, they're able to get away with Alfred, and Derrick Rose is playing well, but he's 32 years old.
Yeah, I want to ask about, talk about the staff that, Leon and Wes have built. One thing that I guess, like, for, you working there, is that they don't really talk to the press at all. They don't talk to the fans. They're just doing a job. And do you think that's going to bite them as in the back eventually? Because the fans want to hear from what they have to say, and how the future looks.
I mean, it's been more than 8 months since Leon Rose has talked to the media. It was literally the Tom Thibodeau Zoom press conference, and since then, nothing. Even after the draft, he didn't talk to us. He didn't talk to us during free agency. He didn't talk to us on media day. After the Derrick Rose trade. I mean, it's after the trade deadline. I mean, I could go on and on. Is he going to talk on trash bag day, when the season ends? I don't know if it's superstition at this point. But listen, in a way, this pandemic has eased Leon's transition, because we're not around. When we go to the Garden, they put us up on the Chase Bridge. We're not allowed to leave there. We're trapped as prisoners. We can't go onto the court, and usually before the game, we're beyond in the locker room. We're on the court schmoozing with assistant coaches and some of the scouts and the president. But so Leon doesn't have to deal with us at all. The other night I saw he was sitting on the bench 2 hours before the game, watching for like a half hour straight. Some of the players warming up and putting up shots, and he was just sitting there. And in normal circumstances, we would have been down there and probably bothering him and trying to chat him up. So, it's been, will it bite him in the back? I mean, as long as they win, no. I mean, I don't even mention it anymore. I used to say Rose, who hasn't commented or hasn't talked to the press since late July, but I don't even drop that in anymore. And because you got to really respect the moves he's made. Hiring Thibodeau was a brilliant move, one that Scott Perry would not have made. And I don't know if Thibodeau would have come to the Knicks if it wasn't for Leon. And, because they're very close, and Leon being his former agent as well as Wesley. So, I mean, they're even executive of the year candidates. When you look at, they have the lowest payroll. They made some shrewd financial decisions with Noel and Alec Burks, and trading for Derrick Rose, where they gave up barely anything, and Dennis Smith Jr. So, and at the trade deadline, they could have made a risky move, and they stood pat. They liked what they saw. They liked the chemistry. So, yeah, they don't talk to the media, but the team is doing the talking for them on the court.
And Mark, the Knicks are going to get LeBron James finally now, because, if you look on social media, LeBron says the league is better when the Knicks are winning. So Ed and I already we're going to print up these LeBron James jerseys. It's finally happening. We're excited.
It's funny because, Zion said over the last weekend, the Garden is his favorite place to play other than New Orleans. And LeBron used to say that all the time. I remember whenever the Garden hosted the All-Star game, maybe it was 2015 or 16, LeBron said that weekend, yeah, I love the Garden. It's my favorite visitors arena. And, we all thought, oh, maybe, LeBron's coming then. But he went to the Lakers. So I just feel that LeBron is going to retire a Laker, and I think his last season will be with his son. I think the Lakers are going to somehow get his son on the squad, and that's going to be LeBron's final season. I don't think LeBron ever wanted any part of New York City. I remember in 2010 his associates saying he didn't want it for his family, too much media attention. So, yeah, I think Zion has a better chance of joining R.J. Barrett than LeBron.
I was going to say, how much do you think is going to change now if the Knicks let's say the Knicks make it to the second round next year? Obviously, next year's free agent class is not that strong, but players, trying to get, maybe getting Bradley Beal via trade, that players will want to come to New York now.
Yeah, Edgar, it's totally changed. I mean, we know the last few years, New York was just not that destination. I don't know if it was the owner or they were losing every single year. And, a playoff drought like that, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, they didn't want to try to be the saviors for the franchise. They thought it was too difficult. But now the culture has changed. There's a winning environment. There's a great coach. They have an all-star in Julius, maybe a second all-star down the road in R.J. Barrett, with a defensive culture. I think this summer, if there's, for instance, Lonzo Ball is a restricted free agent, I think that his future is not in New Orleans. If you watch New Orleans play, Zion Williamson brings the ball down court a lot of times. I think they want Zion as the point forward. So I think a player like Lonzo is definitely looking at New York City, especially because Leon Rose was his former agent. I think there's going to be a lot of free agents this summer and next summer that now have New York on their radar.
Mark, we bring up the quote by LeBron. I absolutely love this quote by Julius Randle. I actually pulled it up here on Twitter. He says, "We're not done yet. We have a long way to go. It's not just about getting fourth place. We're trying to build something here," which I think speaks to this culture that you're talking about. He actually says we're trying to build a culture. We're trying to do things the right way. Is it possible that maybe going back to that talk about Randle, is it possible that maybe the Knicks have finally gotten lucky in terms of acquiring somebody? Because he's only 7 years into the league, and you mentioned him as a guy that's almost played on a LeBron type level in the East, at least. Is it perhaps the first time that the Knicks maybe walk into something that's a bit of luck? Because they usually don't have luck.
Yeah. I mean, very lucky, because let's be honest, several months ago in the off season, he was available for a trade. They were offering him around. In fact, last year's trade deadline with Charlotte, he was available in maybe a Rozier package. This free agency, they were looking at power forwards. I mean, I was told that Jeremy Grant, they made a nice offer to. I think there was another power forward they drafted Obi Toppin, who all he does is play power forward. So they weren't totally sold on Julius coming into the season. So they get very lucky. Imagine if the Knicks had traded Julius to Charlotte and then he became what he has become. I mean, it would just be the curse continuing for the Knicks, but they never pulled the trigger on a deal. And now they have a all-NBA player. And, Jeff Van Gundy is talking about an MVP candidate. It's a little bit of a stretch, but the guy has, almost single-handedly turned around a team with his play. And if he didn't, if the Knicks didn't have Randle, they'd have 15 wins right now. That's how good he's been. So is he going to be on an MVP ballot at number 3? I may put him 3. Or 4. I think when we get the ballots, I think we have a 5-man list to to fill out. So I think he could be a 3, 4, 5 pick by some voters.
It's a good segue too, Mark, because Ed and I fight about Obi Toppin all the time because he's a guy that we're both very familiar with, and Randy and myself, he's played in our summer league every year, Hoops in the Sun at Orchard Beach. But when you look at Randle's numbers, I jotted them down: 23.9 points, 10.5 rebounds, 6.1 assists in 59 games. Those are his averages. How in the world is Obi Toppin, as Ed likes to say, ever going to carve out a career as a Knick if Julius Randle is still here in orange and blue?
I will have to say it's a great point, and you have to wonder this summer. Listen, the Knicks have $60 million in cap space. There's not a ton of free agents anymore. It used to be a big class, but a lot of those guys, like obviously Giannis with the extension and Paul George with the extension, there's not a whole lot of free agents on the elite level. So they're going to be looking at trades, and Bradley Beal, who knows? I know the agent says Bradley Beal will never leave Washington, but listen, Obi Toppin is going to become a trade pawn because Julius Randle does not really play center. He's not a good enough rim protector. Thibodeau loves rim protecting centers. So Julius is their power forward of the future. And Obi is not a 3 and he's not a 5. So, yeah, I mean, down the road, he may be a trade piece, I hate to admit. And listen, he needs a good summer league. He's not getting enough minutes to play through his mistakes. He looks afraid on the court sometimes. He gets the ball. He can't wait to get rid of it. It's like a hot potato. He doesn't even look at the rim anymore. Listen, they may have made a big mistake. We don't know yet. It's too early. But not having the conference tournaments that season, not having the NCAA tournaments that season, maybe scouts didn't get a full picture of Obi. He was playing against St. Bonaventure and Fordham. So if he would have been in the conference tournaments and then the NCAA tournament, maybe scouts would have seen something like, oh boy, maybe he's not going to make that transition. So Edgar, you're a big fan?
No, I'm not. I think he traded. I think the Knicks should have drafted Tyler Halliburton.
Yes.
My thing, Randy.
I'm a big fan, Mark.
Okay.
I'm a producer. Randy's a big Obi fan. And my thing is with Obi, I'm a firm believer, and obviously, Mark, you know me with the Knicks a long time, is that no New York player from New York should never be drafted by a New York team. It never works. It worked one time, Mark Jackson, Rookie of the Year. Besides that, it never worked.
Rod Strickland too.
Yeah, but then Rod left and had a great career someplace else.
and Marbury was good for a little bit. And a little bit.
Too little.
Too little.
First year, they made the playoffs.
Yeah, no, it's right. But with Obi, listen, I wish he would have had the summer league, and you know how the guys come 3-4 weeks before training camp and they have the scrimmages, and he would have got his feet wet. I think he's really suffering right now from a lack of confidence. But when you're the 8th pick in the draft, I mean, at best he looks like a guy who is going to come off the bench maybe for 12 minutes a night the rest of his career. I don't know. I just don't see it. I thought maybe he'd be a little better from 3-point range. I know they didn't draft him to be like a stretch 4, but I don't know what he does to score right now, and he's getting a little better defensively, but he's also not a great defender.
I'm saying you hit it right on the nose. He shoots terrible from 3-point range. He doesn't really have a mid range. He has no post up game. Like, he needs a lot of work. And
he's 23. He's not 19. I mean, that's a concern too. But some friends that I know that know Obi, they say he's always taken a long time to adjust to a new situation, whether it be in high school, even in Westchester, Ossining. He was coming off the bench in high school until his senior year, and then he goes to Dayton, and I think his freshman year took a little while. So maybe he needs to adjust. But Halliburton, they didn't even have Halliburton on their radar at 8. I'll be honest, he was a trade back guy. I don't understand it. Maybe they thought his body wasn't strong enough, or I never could put my finger on it. But within a month of the draft, I got a sense that he wasn't heavy on the radar. And like, if Toppin doesn't fall, they're probably taking a Vassell or a the Lewis kid who's in New Orleans now, the fast point guard. So yeah, it's going to be a big mistake because of Halliburton. He looks real good.
I do have a dream scenario though. My dream scenario before Bobby jumps in on this is Knicks Nets second round playoffs. Game goes to game 7. This city will explode.
That would be amazing. Hopefully Durant will be healthy. Listen, there's 2,000 fans at the Garden now, really loud. By playoff time, it's going to be 5,000 at the Garden, and I'm sure 5,000 at Barclays under the same state guidelines. It would really be amazing for the city, especially if the Yankees are still awful as they are now.
Well, Mark, I guess I wanted to ask you about our other draft choice, because if Obi is a swing and the miss, which I'm hoping that he's not because I am a big fan, I think Quickly has obviously played himself into being a much bigger player and performer on this team than maybe most expected when his name was announced on draft night. How important has he been to their success this year?
I mean, every time I think that he's hitting the wall and he's going to, go down, he rises again. And he rose last night, some huge 3-pointers. His floater game is, I think teams are starting to catch up to it. First of all, they're not fouling him as much. He was drawing so many fouls early in the season. But teams are adjusting to him. But he's got that 3-point shot. I mean, that has not lost him all season. He's a great free throw shooter also. But he's been such a – listen, if it wasn't for Emmanuel Quickly, fans would be so disappointed in Leon Rose over the Obi pick. But Emmanuel, his performance has eased the pain over Obi right now. And, he's going to improve. Maybe not – he's not 19 either. He's 22, about to be 23. I'd like to see him be a better playmaker, obviously. But, the Knicks drafted him knowing he's not really a true point guard, and they're not looking at him as really the starting point guard of the future. I mean, they look at him more of as a Lou Williams type. And I think, this summer, and they're going to try to get a starting point guard. But he's been tremendous, fearless, great spirit on the court, hard worker, a real gym rat. I remember it was not last game, but the game before that, he had a pretty decent outing, and I'm typing my story up on the bridge, and all of a sudden I see Obi shooting, which he should have been. He only played a few minutes that night, but there's Emmanuel Quickly out there on the court shooting for about 25 minutes. I was like, wow. I mean, these guys don't want to go home. I mean, they want to work.
So, Mark, I'm going to ask you to put the GM cap on here, because one of the things that Ed and I debate all the time is if this is the first step, let's say, in progress, in terms of the journey to maybe get somewhere finally as a Knicks fan, because Ed and I have always said, are we ever going to see the Knicks win a championship in our lifetime, right? So putting the GM cap on here, is Thibs the coach on this team when they finally get to the finals? And which player from this core, players or player from this core, are still here when we finally maybe get to the finals? Do we see Randle? Do we see Barrett? Do we see Mitchell Robinson quickly? Maybe Obi? Which guys will be there when that time comes?
Yeah, I think Tom is the coach. I mean, Leon Rose just adores him. Leon thinks he's as good as any coach in the NBA. So, and Tom has a 5-year deal. And listen, he never got it done. He never got the championship in Chicago. Listen, if Derrick Rose, doesn't break down health-wise, maybe they would have. But I think Tom's a better coach now. I think he just turned 63. He's a better head coach now than he was in Chicago, because I think he's learned from his mistakes. Earlier we talked about maybe overplaying guys. and they're not as sharp for the playoffs. He said several times this season, all I want this team to be is playing our best toward the end of the season. And he's paced them very well. He's not practiced as hard as in the past. So I think he's learned from his mistakes, and I think he can be a championship coach. I think the core, listen, they need another all-star. And Julius, can't do it alone. But I think Julius and RJ are definitely two pieces to the core. Mitchell, we don't know yet. We don't know about his durability yet. That's why they may really try to sign Noel desperately. Derek is going to be 33 next season. I mean, they'll maybe try to bring him back, but when they're championship ready, they need a star point guard. Is Lonzo Ball that guy? I mean, he was rusty the other night at the Garden, but he's improved, and he's young. He's 23. Maybe Lonzo is their point guard of the future on that title team. But yeah, they need more pieces. Obviously, they need another star. They need a star point guard. Maybe not the final piece, but they're still two pieces away.
I tell you one thing: Lonzo won't make that defensive mistake that he made that day, the last play with Derrick Rose. Thibodeau will lose it.
Yes, Dan Van Gundy lost it too. Not just in the locker room, but when we got him on Zoom, he was as angry as I've seen him, and he gets angry. He went on for a couple of minutes ripping his club, and you don't see that a lot in the new NBA. I mean, head coaches have to be very cautious, and Thibodeau is very, unfortunately for the media, Thibodeau is very reluctant to criticize guys. He talks around it. When they don't play well, he'll definitely hold his punches. But Stan Van Gundy was furious at Lonzo Ball. It was a terrible mistake. I mean, all it is about stopping a three-pointer. So I don't know why Lonzo Ball isn't right on Reggie Bullock, who's one of their best three-point shooters.
I was going to say, go ahead, Bobby.
No, I was just going to say, Mark, since you also cover tennis, I was curious how I'm going to get rid of this tennis elbow. Do you have any suggestions for me? I mean,
well, you may need to rest a little, but
Ed doesn't allow that, Mark. Every Thursday night, there's got to be a podcast. But, God, what were you going to say?
Mark, Bobby almost wanted to leave me permanently for the rest of my life after this show.
Can't pay. No, you guys, how many years has it been right now?
Of working together or doing the podcast? This is a new podcast for us, but working together, we have a long history, unfortunately, as Randy would say as well. Ed's one of those guys, Mark, as you know, when the text messages start flowing, you want to shake them, but it's just tough. It's tough to maneuver away. I know he probably pinned you into a corner and said, you got to come on. And again, as I've done many times, Mark, for previous guests, I apologize for my co-host in advance.
No, I'm enjoying it. No, I'm very happy to listen. It's been a long time this late in the season where I'm covering games that matter. I mean, it's been so difficult, especially these past 7 seasons. After the All-Star break, it's not even like they were in a playoff race. It's like we come back from the All-Star break and we just got another couple of months of meaningless basketball. I'm writing about the draft. I'm writing about the free agents. The games don't matter that much. We still write a little about the games, but it's been a slog for a long time, and that's why it's so much fun right now. Even though we're not in the locker room, it's still a lot of fun covering this club because they play the right way, as Larry Brown would say. I mean, it's about defense, it's about sharing the ball, and it's about being clutch, and they've been very clutch.
Well, I pray that in the playoffs that they give you better seats and put you guys in the 100 level instead of all the way up top.
No, there's no way. They're trying to sell every good seat possible. Yeah, listen, it started for safety protocols. They wanted, we had to come at 3:30 in the afternoon for a 7:30 game to get tested at the Garden Theater. Breen, Walt Frazier, myself, all the media it was a chore, to come that early. But now they've relaxed. As long as you're vaccinated, you no longer have to test. But so they put us up in the bridge, and we thought, well, safety protocols. But we'd love to be back in our old press box, which is on the 200 level, which is a little closer. But it doesn't look like it's happening.
Mark, we make a lot of jokes tonight, obviously, which is a good thing, I think, for podcasts. But, it's not too long ago that Kevin Durant, I think, might have been joking, but maybe taking a legitimate shot at the Knicks, saying that they were not the cool place to be. Do you think it's fair to say now that it's possible that the Knicks are a bit cooler now than they were, let's say, at least at the start of this season?
Yes, without a doubt. And it's just amazing that the Nets can have a dream team like they have, and yet you turn on the radio and you see the back page of the newspapers, and it's still the Knicks. I thought that the Nets would be bigger once they got Durant and Irving, and they never seem to get. They're not stealing Knicks fans. I mean, this was the season to steal Knicks fans. And there's no way they're stealing one Knicks fan the way the Knicks are playing. I mean, it's just one of those weird circumstances where Brooklyn cannot take over the town. Listen, maybe if the Knicks get eliminated in the first round and the Nets move on to the finals, and maybe there'll be some Nets buzz. I'm sure there will be, especially if all their guys are healthy. But right now, this season, maybe it's because of all their injuries, but they just have not created the buzz. They create more buzz around the country. Maybe there's some buzz about this team, but not in New York City, I hate to say.
Yeah, Rachel Nichols actually said the same thing on ESPN. She said that the Knicks get the back page of the paper whether they're winning or losing.
It's amazing. I mean, listen, we see our stories online, the clicks, go toward the Knicks a lot more than the Nets. And I don't know if that's ever going to change. The Knicks have such a tradition. I don't know if the Nets don't have the marketing down correctly. Maybe they have the wrong type of superstars. Kevin Durant is not the most engaging guy, and he's also been hurt. Kyrie takes too many personal days. I don't know. The Knicks, this team is so lovable. I mean, because of their defense, and I don't know, the Nets have not captured anyone's imagination if you follow the Knicks right now.
Ed, is that a turtleneck that you're wearing?
No, it's not. No, it's
not. Good. Hop in there, bud.
Nah, it's my last question, Mark. What's your hope how the season ends for the Knicks? Is it second round against the Nets and going to a game 7? Is it a success if they go to the first round and lose? What determines the success season for the Knicks?
I mean, this is a pandemic season with so many weird things going on. It's like Miami in the bubble. They go to the finals. And why do they go to the finals? No one expected it. And that's because things are just so weird. Everyone's trapped in the bubble. It's all about basketball. And it's sort of like this season also. We wrote a story about how all these players are coming in at night, shooting, practicing their craft, late at night at Tarrytown. And when they get on the road, they're going to the gym at night. That's because of the pandemic. There's nothing else to do. They have no social life. They're not allowed to leave the hotel. There's no appearances, endorsement-wise. So it's all about basketball. And if it's all about basketball, that's where Thibodeau shines. So I think, Randle said this in that quote, anything is possible. And I think the Knicks are starting to believe in this weird pandemic season, anything is possible, including what Miami did. I don't think they can do it. I don't think that Randle has enough help offensively. But, I think they could definitely get to the second round. If the Nets are the opponent and the Nets and Kevin Durant is not healthy, who knows? So, listen, if this was a normal season, I'd say, hey, getting the first round is a nice step. But because it's the pandemic, all bets are off. I think we could see another weird situation of a team like Miami getting to the NBA Finals. I don't know if that's the Knicks, but
why not the Knicks?
It's great, but why not? It's the great equalizer. They may have the best coach right now in the Eastern Conference. I just think that anything can happen because of how crazy it is. Someone could get the virus, and a star player can be shut down for 7 days. I mean, anything is possible.
Mark, I think for the Knicks, it's big that they get home court advantage in the first round. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I think, listen, Atlanta's very good, and who knows if Trae Young doesn't go down late in the third quarter. Who knows what happens? They're playing very good. They have a lot of talent, and they had a lot of injuries last night too, besides just Trae Young. But if they could hold on to that fourth spot, and listen, they're 3-0 against the Hawks this year. A 4-5 first-round matchup with Atlanta is not the worst thing for them. But, yeah, home court would be huge. I think they're 21-10 at the Garden right now. So it would be such a boost for the franchise to finish fourth, and that is right now their goal. And, I mean, they have a tough schedule, and they have to go out west for several games. It's a 6-game road trip. So I don't know if they could hold on to the fourth spot, but it's definitely something they are definitely eyeing right now.
I actually thought that they would win about 33 games for the entire season. I never thought that we would be on having a podcast with you where they're 33-27 with games still to play.
I looked at my preseason prediction. I had them at 30 wins. And in my comment, it sounded like it was a high pick because I said an ordinary coach, I'd probably put 23 wins. But because of Thibodeau, he's such a good, taskmaster and preparer. I put him for 30 games. And now they'll probably, there's 12 left. They do have a tough West Coast trip. If they go 6-6, I think they could get to 40 wins. I think they could maybe go 7-5 the rest of the way or 6-6. So 39-40 wins in a 72-game season. Just shocking. Absolutely shocking. All those Las Vegas bettors who bet the over on the 22, they've already pocketed their money a long time ago.
This also means no 10-day contract for Edgar Burgos, which is just so disappointing for both of us.
They were eyeing him.
That was it. Eyeing. That's it.
Yeah, Ed.
Mark, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know it's late. I know you go to bed, pretty early. So,
well, it was a late night last night at the Garden. That overtime didn't help our deadlines any, but it was still fun to write about.
Well, definitely appreciate you having come on the show and taking the time with us, and and listening to all of Ed's BS, which is it's tough for me. I know it's got to be tough.
I've been able to survive it though.
All right, Mark.
Let me know if you know any remedies for this tennis elbow, Mark. U.S. Open's coming. It's only around the corner, so
I'm sure by the Open you'll be okay.
Be okay.
You got to find out. Actually, thanks for reminding me. I have to call the U.S. Open people to find out what their plan is for the tournament. They had no fans last year. Hopefully there'll be maybe 10,000, come late August.
Did they already say that the Knicks will have 5,000 fans for the playoffs?
Well, Cuomo did come out and say for the indoor events, they're going to raise it to 20%. That would be close to 5,000. I was in Dallas last week. They were already at 20%. So there were 5,000 at that game. And it seemed okay. Listen, it's Texas. No one's wearing masks outside for sure. Even in elevators, I walked in my hotel and no one's in a mask. I'm like, it's really bizarre. But yeah, I think Cuomo has said he plans to get it to 5,000 come playoff time.
Awesome.
I see a lot more, punches into the air from Anthony Donahue, Ed. I feel like it's coming. It's coming after these wins. So if he's listening or watching.
Is Anthony the guest next week, or
he's been a guest before?
He's been a guest before.
He's everywhere.
And a friend, of course. And a friend. Thanks again, Mark. Appreciate you.
All right, guys.
I appreciate it.
All right.
I could have sworn that was a turtleneck you were wearing.
You know, listen, man, let me tell you something. You robbed me up before the show started. I know you got a lot of stuff going on. I know that you got a lot of heat happening in your life. So I'm going to be nice to you today.
And I got papers that I have to grade, bro.
If you need help with the papers,
days, man. I'm a professor.
If you need help with the papers, I'm here for you, my friend.
That's a lie, Ed. That is a lie. That's a friendship thing right there, because I know that if I said to you, come over here and grade these papers, you would say yes, but you would not come.
Guarantee I'll be there. Guarantee. Next week,
I don't see it.
I want to talk to your class via Zoom. Next week, I'm there. You are not.
You can teach my class next week if you want. That's fine with me. I got a few weeks to go. You can teach the class. Take some stuff off my plate. Otherwise, like I said, last minute, Ed, last minute, Marc Berman. My light is so bright. I didn't even have time to
last minute.
I didn't even have time to adjust it. My light is so bright. Randy's like, you can't see you.
You said I can't see you.
I didn't have any time. There was no time. Yeah. I still think it was a good show. We definitely appreciate Marc Berman, New York Post, and as I mentioned, the authority on the Knicks. So always great to chat with him. And like I said, really, all jokes aside, cannot believe that we are talking about the Knicks potentially upending someone in the postseason, not even in the first round, but maybe the second round, no less, and possibly even the Brooklyn Nets. Home court advantage, Randle potentially winning major awards, and Thibs being coach of the year. I mean, it's been a weird year, but definitely if you're a Knicks fan, it's been a great year.
Like you said, it's fun to see, definitely fun to talk about, especially, the heartaches and the headaches we've received for the past, 16 out of 20 years. So, hopefully it's a nice playoff ride. So that's the goal.
Yeah, I think the Knicks, of course, again, in all seriousness, they've given us some moments over the last, 2 decades. I always felt that once Patrick Ewing was gone, it set the franchise back significantly in terms of really being able to, finally get to be that kind of competitive team that they were back when he was the centerpiece of the squad. And again, they've had their moments. I think Melo and company had some good years. But, one of the things that Randy and I have always spoken about is it just always kind of felt like the Knicks were kind of like, bandaging things every year, getting the last ounces out of some major veterans, a Rasheed Wallace, a Jason Kidd, a Chauncey Billups, you name it. The Knicks had so many of these guys that were stars at one point, a Tracy McGrady, they bring these guys in kind of at that point. But now it finally seems like Mark talked about tonight, like the Knicks actually have some players and pieces that could be here within the next 5 years when maybe they finally get to that point of being at the precipice of winning an NBA championship. Because, you look at Randle's age, like I said, 7 years in the league. I think it's fair to say he's legitimately in his prime.
He is. And, one of the things that we talked about earlier that Mark brought up was load management. And, we had I'm going to bring it up again to Randy since he's not on the show. Randy, the Knicks are 8-0 since Randy went on Twitter and said that Thibs pretty much his rotations, doesn't know what he's doing with his rotations. And then 2, that Julius Randle should be playing less minutes. He looks tired. And I said, no 26-year-old man that plays in the NBA, we should be worrying about load management. And since that day of Randy's tweet, the Knicks are 8-0.
My only fear, Ed, is that I wonder if this is the Randle that you will see beyond this year. Like, is it possible that it's a career year for him and that he never duplicates? Look, even in the past, and this is, I think, a fair point. You go back to the days of D'Antoni, and there were players in those given seasons, even when he was here, like a Chris Duhon that was posting ridiculous assist averages, or a David Lee that was in the all-star conversation, and all-star even at one point. guys can have career years. Guys can play well on teams that aren't particularly playing well. I think the one thing here is Randle is playing well and the team is winning too. But I would still be a little concerned as a Knicks fan if this is, again, since it's such an extreme where you have him playing at such a high level now, and there was a point in time when, it was nothing near this. So you wonder, where does he fall somewhere in the middle, or does he stay like this, as Mark said, left-handed LeBron James? That might be asking a lot from him. But if that's the case, then I do think Obi Toppin probably will be traded. And I'd be curious to see who they pair Randle with. Like, who's the other star? Is it Zion Williamson? Is it Zion and Lonzo? Or do they go with – I would love to see Bradley Beal be a Knick. I think we've talked about that before on the podcast. I think he would be great in New York.
My thing with Lonzo, to me, he's actually, he's gotten better every season, but he's not a star. Will he elevate if he becomes on the Knicks? We'll see. But he's not somebody I'm relying on to get the Knicks to the next level. A guy, like you said, Zion down the road, but Zion is going to be in New Orleans for at least 5 more seasons before anything. So I'm not even worried about that. And I think the Twitterverse, nobody should be talking about that for a very long time. I think Bradley Beal is the guy you target, and, you try to make a move to, and that's the guy that could help the team. But, Bradley Beal has never said that he wanted to get traded. He still has a few more years on his contract with Washington. And then the other thing is that with Randle, like you said, next season's his last season, with his 3rd season with the Knicks. Do you extend him, and do you give him a max contract? If he has a season like this, yeah, but what about if his season's not as good as this one? Is he a max guy? So they got questions, so we'll see what happens.
How about someone like Zach LaVine? I've been high on him. I thought he'd be a guy that the Knicks could possibly target as well. I mean, I think that there are other guys that'll be on the market that'll be interesting to see if they go that direction. If not, a Bradley Beal or a Zion Williamson, as you said. Maybe Williamson's not even in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, Zach LaVine is a baller. But I actually like what they're doing over there.
In Chicago.
In Chicago, yes.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think as a basketball fan, and this is, the mecca for hoops, no doubt about that, you got to be thrilled that both teams are giving us the kind of seasons that they are. And even with some of the drama that the Nets have had off the court, there's still plenty to be excited about there, because, again, that was a franchise that has had some ups and downs. Maybe not as much recently, but they had kind of been at the height of the sport and then fallen down and now worked their way back up. And how great would it be to have a rivalry here? I mean, we haven't had that probably ever. I mean, I think there were some seasons where when the Nets were in New Jersey, where they were good and the Knicks were good, but we've never really had like
no, it's never been a rivalry.
Type of rivalry.
I don't think they've ever had a rivalry.
Yeah, so it'd be pretty exciting to see that come playoff time, and possibly both teams competing for Eastern Conference championships for years to come.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Like I said, my dream scenario is a Game 7 second round. I just want to see feel the atmosphere in the city and the Twitters, and Randy's gonna go crazy. Randy's probably gonna have a parade at Orchard Beach. It's got a lot of things going on. I can't wait to see it.
So Ed, again, in all seriousness, do you think the Knicks get home court, right, in the first round?
I think they play Boston, not Atlanta, in the first round. Okay,
so you think they play Boston. Do you think they beat Boston in the first round?
It's going to be a tougher series than Atlanta.
Okay. So in your scenario, they draw Boston first round. They beat Boston with the home court, and they move on to face the Nets. And if you were putting money, if you were wagering,
it all depends how healthy KD is and where's James Harden and his hamstring.
Okay.
If they're all healthy, I'm gonna go with talent.
All right. So I'm gonna play kind of devil's advocate here. So let's say best case scenario, they do reach the second round, they draw the Nets, big time, hoopla here in the city. They beat the Nets in the second round. Do we see what Mark just brought up? Do we see the Knicks possibly getting to obviously the East Finals and then the NBA championship. Could they possibly get to the NBA Finals this year?
If the Knicks reach the Eastern Conference Finals, this city is going to be nuts. I mean, if they beat the Nets in the second round, they won the championship. They won the championship.
Sort of.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what I'm saying. But for Knicks fans, they won the championship. They're gonna be partying like yesterday after the game down 34th Street. But it'll be a successful season, and then obviously next year they're gonna talk about, hey, who can we get over here to make the team better? So we'll see what happens.
So, I mean, but, again, with the podcast, we've spoken about it before. We had Nets Lakers in the finals. So is that narrative changed because the Knicks have a win streak? I mean,
no. The narrative hasn't changed, but the injuries have. So you have
the opening is there for the Knicks because the Nets are banged up. And
the Lakers, they might not make the finals. I mean, LeBron's still out. AD's supposed to be back in the next couple of days, but we don't know what type of AD we're going to have. So, right now, the Lakers got to worry about the Clippers. They got to worry about Denver, even the Suns. So we'll see what happens.
I can't believe we're here on the podcast talking about the Knicks in the finals.
Yeah, well, hopefully we can have a show next week, guys. I'm the fans out there. I know my man, my friend Bobby C has papers. I will help him. Guarantee, fans, I will help him. Send your emails at Bobby C on Twitter and say, please don't leave Edgar. Okay? Thank you.
Again, I apologize to those at home for my co-host, Edgar Burgos, here on Step in the Arena. I think it's probably a good time to wrap it up, unless you have any, home remedies for tendonitis of the arms.
Ice it. 20 minutes on, and then put some heat on.
Ice it?
Ice it 3 times a day.
See that, the acupuncturist says that it's heat that I need.
No, heat 3 times a day. I would do it.
You just said ice, Ed. You just said ice.
No, ice and heat. Ice and heat.
Ice and heat.
Yes.
What are you, icy hot? What? Listen, Ed, we got to figure out my light for the next show. You didn't give me any real time tonight to get prepared. There was no jersey behind me. I'm standing up.
All right.
And again, I'm looking, a little Casperish tonight.
No, like you said, I'm going to prepare next week. I'm going to tell Bobby C by Monday who we have for Thursday. And guys, once again, please Twitter.
It's the voice Bobby C. Not Bobby C. at Twitter. Randy, he always messes up both of our Twitter handles. Meanwhile, they're at the bottom of the video version of the podcast.
And the hashtag is Bobby Don't Leave Edgar.
Step in the Arena on the Cruise Control Podcast Network. We appreciate you tuning in tonight, whether it is on the audio or the visual side of things, even if my light is too bright. And again, a special thanks to New York Post Knicks Authority, Marc Berman, for being our guest. We'll see you next week on Thursday night. Deuces.
Later.